For those of you who've been around Twin Cam for long enough, this will come as absolutely no surprise to any of you, because after 20 years of wanting one, I have finally bought my dream car. It's the car I envisioned having when I turned 17, but by that point prices had risen too far. So 8 years on from that, this is it. I suppose I'm very lucky that, above all else, the car that I beamed in the presence of as a child is not some kind of rarity or some kind of supercar or something nonsensical. In fact, it is the most influential motor car the world has ever seen, and this little one has over 5.3 million friends to play with. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Susie, my 1984 Austin Mini, finished in opaline green metallic, and before me, she'd had the same owner since 1987. Registered on the 1st of August 1984, the first day of B registrations, Susie is one of the very last Mark IV Minis, meaning she has the original dinky 10-inch wheels and even smaller drum brakes all round. As I said, a Mini has been my dream car for as long as I can remember. So though I couldn't quite afford one at the age of 17, hence the Metros that kicked off this whole YouTube thing, a Mini has been an expectation. As such, I didn't want to buy just any old car. One that's been 7 different colours, that's been reshelled 6 times, has had 3 different engines, 26 owners, and has received a butchering in the name of Mini Light alloy wheels, a white roof, and some Cooper stripes. The Mini I'd always been after was one true to its heritage, with some scars to show its 40 years of life, sure, but one that was innocent. Preferably a car with 10-inch wheels, an interior that wasn't grey or black, finished in a friendly shade. At the start of this year, I wasn't actively looking at Minis. I did message a chap about a British Open Classic, which is a special edition from the early 90s, finished in British Racing Green with a 1275 engine, which would have been nice, a half-leather beige interior, and critically, an electric Webasto roof. That would have been absolutely lovely, but it wasn't in the best of condition, and by the time I got there, it had been sold, so that was never going to happen. But as I said, I wasn't actively looking at Minis, and so I got a message from a friend one Tuesday morning, saw it was a link to a car, but thought, I'll check that later. I get sidetracked very, very easily, and I was editing a video at the time, so I thought I'll put the blinkers on and just keep working. That was until I received a follow-up text a couple of minutes later with the immortal words, "Bad time to go AWOL, it's opaline." Opaline green metallic appears to be a rather divisive colour, but it's possibly my favourite Austin Rover era shade, and all the older women that I know absolutely adore it. After all, that is kind of the demographic that this car was specified for some 41 years ago. But after exchanging a few messages, getting a few extra photos, and hearing about the history of this little sweetie, I knew that this was the car for me. I knew that I was going to buy this car, and I knew that it was going to be my Mini. The problem is that I live up in Lancashire, in the northwest of England, and little Susie has spent her entire life in Bournemouth, on the south coast. And the number plate nerds amongst you will have already noticed that by the FX registration number, which makes absolutely no sense for Bournemouth, but nonetheless, this is a Bournemouth registration number. So I couldn't just go down and view it immediately, but I knew that this was my car. So I sent a £250 deposit without having ever seen the car. 5 days later, I enslaved my aforementioned friend, Connor, to travel 270 miles with me down south to go and collect it. After having a little chat, giving the car a once-over, and of course exchanging what was left of the original asking price, £5,250 for those of you who are interested in that kind of thing, we hit the road. But as you can probably tell from the video title, things didn't quite go so smoothly. For the first 30 miles of the trip, things went perfectly well, or at least as well as you'd expect for a car that probably hadn't left Bournemouth for a very long time. Connor was following me down the A31 onto the M27, and we were heading for Caffeine and Machine to meet a friend before all going our separate ways. Susie was bobbing along very happily at 70 miles per hour, and while she wasn't flushed with power to retain speed up some hills, I was pleased. The only issue was a very slight misfire under full load. We stopped for a loo break at Rownham Services before quickly proceeding. Pulling out of the car park, the car seemed to have a slight stutter, but back on the motorway that misfire had become a full-blown ignition system breakdown. VMAX was now 35 miles per hour, and all of 1,000 metres on, I rightly pulled over. In the boot were tools and some spares, including spark plugs, HT leads and an ignition coil. But the former two were not causing such an issue, and the latter was a spare I had left over from Melody, whose non-ballast ignition isn't compatible with Susie's ballast system. I knew this was the case, and I didn't even attempt a motorway side repair. We retreated into the trees, and I called recovery. There were some issues over the phone, but I finally got through to someone with some humanity, and all of 80 minutes later, a couple of very friendly AA chaps came to help. Curtis, my new best friend, happened to own two Minis of his own, a van from the 70s and a Sprite from the 90s, so he agreed with my diagnosis and towed me nearly halfway home. But knowing this was just old car shenanigans, play silly games, win silly prizes, etc., my spirits hadn't at all been dampened. You join me in my little broken Austin Mini at, I believe, Winchester Services. I've been recovered to here, and then I'm going to be relayed home. No problem, believed to be the coil, so, 40 years old. Never been changed, I don't think. It's certainly very old nonetheless, but I've been filing through the history of this car, and I can't show you all this too closely because there's a lot of personal information on it, but the amount of stuff is just incredible. And I also have here, if I cover up numbers that are important, old V5s. I believe, let me just make sure to see exactly what this is, but I believe this is the original vehicle registration document that was issued to this car's second owner in May 1987. It's ridiculous. The history with this thing is mad, and I love it. It's not full history. There are bits missing. There's no owner's handbook, for example. There's no original service thing, but there is lots and lots of love that's been given to this car over the years, and so so although we have had a setback, AA van is in front of me, we're going to go in a minute, even with the setback, I'm still so very, very pleased with this little thing. Of course, the car still works. She just doesn't like hard work, bless her. I'm much the same. We were relayed onto a big AA truck, so big in fact that we picked up another new friend on the way. A head gasket had failed on a Focus, and its owner works for a major sweet manufacturer. In the boot were boxes full of rejects and test batches, so Susie and I were treated to some. By 10 o'clock that evening, on the 9th of March 2025, after 20 years of waiting, I had an Austin Mini of my own parked on the driveway. The following morning, I had a further poke about my new car, had a little clean up of the ignition system, and went for a drive. Since that moment, Susie and I have covered nearly 800 miles together, and to be honest with you, I still haven't fixed the problem. That's just my laziness for you. But in all honesty, she just works. Now, of course, I haven't been on any long, fast motorway journeys, but for pootling about town and pootling about the countryside over summer, there is no better car for the job. In fact, up until March this year, when I bought her, Susie was her previous owner's only car. And she had been since 1987, when she walked into her local Austin Rover dealer and bought a very sensible 3-year-old second-hand Mini. So I am Susie's third owner, and that is why I've called her Susie, because the woman I bought her off has given up driving due to her age and deteriorating eyesight, and she is called Susan. And so I think it's only suitable that I call this car Susie. And as you'd expect with that kind of provenance, there's a hell of a history file. Right, sorry about the noise. People have to live their lives, of course, and so there are people gardening next door. Anyway, as I mentioned in the bit where we were broken down, I can't show you everything here due to personal information, but there are certain bits that I will show you, and I will certainly talk you all through it. So the oldest bit of information I have for this little car is the second owner's original V5, the registration document from when she bought the car on the 29th of May 1987. So it says date of registration 1st of the 8th 84, that's obviously when the car itself was registered, and then May 87 when she took ownership. So less than 3 years old. The blooming car was less than 3 years old. And I don't have, unfortunately, its first MOT. So in the UK, a car needs an MOT every year, but brand new cars only need one after 3 years. So the 1st of August 87 is when this car's first MOT was due. The first MOT I have on file is from November 1988. So that will be the car's second MOT, plus a couple of months. So I have that from there, 29th of November 1988. Then I have 89, and then I have 1990. And then I have a fail from 1991, and then a pass from 91. And a little bit of work it had done there was fitting new front wheel cylinders, new brake shoes at the front as well, and the brakes were bled. And it says on the receipt, 3rd of December 1991, registration number B931OFX, of course, Mini 1000, mileage 9,651. 9,000 miles back in 1991. Then had a battery at some point within the next year, and then December 92 MOT pass. November 93 MOT fail on just headlamp aim, wiper blades, just little things like that. And then a pass from 1993. MOT pass 1994. MOT fail in 1995 for brakes need adjusting, headlamps are low, and one of the washers was missing the screen. Again, tiny little things. And then an MOT pass 1995. MOT pass 1996. Just a huge amount of history. But then we get to some more interesting stuff. So I have an invoice here from a classic car restoration company in 1997. So this is the 18th of July 1997. And the car had an enormous amount of work done. So bear in mind, 1997, this little thing is 13 years old. Now, of course, they were still building Minis in 1997, but that's an aberration. They built them for 41 years. There aren't many cars that have such long production runs. But when it was 13 years old, this car was worth nothing. It was just a 13-year-old Mini with, I don't know quite how many miles it had on it at this point. I suppose we can look at the last MOT and see 16,000 miles. But as I said, Minis rust. They really love to rust. And so she loved this car so much that in 1997, when it was worth nothing, she spent £1,936.72 on getting some rust sorted. So I have some photographs here, which I'll take out of this little wallet, and I'll show you up close. If the camera will be able to see them, if it will adjust its exposure, which I really hope it will. There you go, it's adjusting a little bit. So you can see that on the offside rear quarter, it's had a little bit of rust repair. And you can also see in the rear screen that it has that AA Home Start sticker that it still has today, and that's a little bit creased. And there's another photograph of it having some work done around the rear end. Again, I don't know whether that's going to, I'll have to really go close in order to get the exposure to adjust on the camera. But you see the Mini badge is in the right place there. Mini badge is no longer in the right place. But yeah, you can just see, yeah, this car was really well loved. And so while maybe not, absolutely everything was done, certainly an absolute fortune wasn't spent keeping it in good condition. She loved this car so much that she wanted to give it what it needed in order to survive forever. And 41 years on, 41 years for a car that was considered disposable after 5, it's still here. And so we have that big invoice there. And then we see, oh, there's extra welding omitted from that first invoice, actually. That's an extra £146.88. So that's over £2,000 she spent in 1997, when £2,000 went a lot further. Yeah, it's a little bit incredible. 1997, failed on emissions, I think, but then passed. Oh no, actually that is an emissions pass. It's just the emissions thing is there. Yeah, there you go. Passed 1997, invoice for the MOT. What's that had done? There's the first service invoice there in June 1998. So, you know, this car certainly doesn't have full history regardless, but it doesn't have any service history really up until 1998. Now, considering how much she loved this car, I'm sure it was serviced in the late 80s and the early 90s, but there's the first invoice for an oil change at least. Failed an MOT in 1998 as well. It needed a shock absorber and its emissions were a bit high, but then passed, of course. And then 1998, that was the invoice for the work being done. 99, what's that one? I can't quite read this handwriting. Steering rack boots it had in 1999. MOT passed in 2000. So the car is 16 years old. It's got all this history leading up to this point, and that's the first MOT in my lifetime. So there you go. MOT invoice. What's this one? It says actually here, it's got the correct registration plate, but it says Mini 850. Of course, it's not a Mini 850, it's a Mini 1000. New speedometer cable in 2001. Failed an MOT in 2001 because the handbrake wasn't working right. But then, of course, passed it. Then we have, again, all these ones are sideways. Rear wheel cylinders in 2001 as well. It's just the stuff that it's going to need, isn't it? 2002 MOT pass. 2003 MOT fail on emissions. And then passed in 2003. And then there is a new V5 document. In fact, actually just before that, we have stripped down, supply and fit new clutch master cylinder, bleed the clutch system, fit a new exhaust, tune carburettor. She spent £189 in 2003 on those things. Then it has a new V5 document because they reissued all the V5s at some point. So that's from 2004. MOT pass November 2004. Service, replace a lamp and adjust valve clearances in 2004. Advised to the customer, front brake shoes are worn low, rear tyres are worn on edges. And then there's another invoice in 2005 to have that work done that was suggested should be done. MOT pass in 2005, MOT pass in 2006. And here's when we start to see a few more things. So there's a service invoice here, and then there is, again, 2006, replace clutch master cylinder. So that's only 3 years on from the last clutch master cylinder. So I don't know quite what's going on there. Failed the MOT in 2006. Headlamp, one of the headlamps not working on main beam. Washers, steering rack gaiter split. Exhaust leak. Brakes imbalanced. Passed in 2007. Service invoice. I love that. One of the things that was done to help pass the MOT was unblock washers. It's the tiniest little things. The car's in great condition, relatively. 2008 pass. A service in 2008, they put 1040 oil in, which is a bit too thin. That is what Austin Rover specified, but really you want 2050 in a Mini because of the shared gearbox. They really put the 1040 in for fleet, so everything just takes the same oil, and also for emissions reasons. They pollute a little bit less with 1040, but they're better with 2050. There's even a little post-it note to remind her when the MOT is. 9 a.m. on Tuesday, November the 10th. And that was 2008. It had, again, so December 2008, clutch slave cylinder. So you can see there's some clutch issues coming in here, which is a bit funny. We'll go through all this in the problems thing in the next video, but I just want to talk you through it all. Speedometer not working, 2009. There's even a letter here from her local garage sent to her to inform her that your vehicle's MOT runs out on the above date. It's all just so quaint. Failed an MOT on a little bit of rust in 2008, then passed. Service again. Yeah, there's a lot more history the newer we get because she must have retained the receipts. So yeah, rear brake cylinders, a drive shaft seal in 2009, another reminder to tell her it needs an MOT, issued new MOT in 2009, another service, puncture repair in 2010. Yeah, it's amazing. Hazard warning switch faulty. Rear fog lamp not working, 2010. Passed the MOT in 2010. Keeps going. Service in 2010. Clutch problem. More MOT passes in 2011. Had a new clutch in 2011. Headlamp aim was adjusted. Check for water leak, found leak from radiator, replace radiator, and that is 2012. More MOT passes, new outer CV boot, MOT pass in 2013. Little bit of welding in 2014 around the rear subframe. Yep, rear quarter panel had some welding in 2014. Ignition key stuck in lock, 2014. Replace steering lock. That's easy, isn't it? MOT 2014, pass, advisory on an oil leak. Another MOT. MOT pass in 2016. Yeah, it just keeps going. Replace some fuel hose, carry out service. A little bit of welding here. Interior door handle replaced. It's just ludicrous, the sheer amount of stuff in the history of this car. MOT in 2018. MOT again, when was this? 2019. New battery. It's amazing, it really is. Another cooling system leak. Check for oil leak. She had an advisory on an oil leak in an MOT and she asked them to remedy the oil leak, which, you know, virtually no one gets done. Here are new tyres in 2020. She had a new rear subframe in it in 2020. Another MOT pass in 2021. MOT and service. This is 2022 now. Adjust wheel bearing. Strip down rear brakes. Clean and adjust. Failed an MOT in 2022. Needed a new rear brake cylinder. Play in steering rack as an advisory in 2022. Yeah, it's ace. Absolutely love it. She's even kept some of the documentation from when she taxed it in 2022. And yet it just keeps going. 2024 MOT pass, and that's the current one. And then it's all my stuff then from there on. It's incredible, the fact that there's so much history with this car. And of course, on my V5, my registration document, it says number of former keepers, 2. The same one since 1987. So that is the ludicrous amount of history that is with this car. And I could be here forever talking you through it all in more detail, but I think that will do. Now, all this isn't to say that I've bought some kind of immaculate mollycoddle garage queen. As you'll already have seen, this little car has lived a life, and while it's been treated to a lot, it is a 41-year-old Mini that was used as an everyday car until only a few months ago. It does require some work, both mechanically and aesthetically, but the key is that it's original. As I mentioned at the start, it's becoming more and more uncommon to find any kind of Mini in vaguely original condition, and even this one has found itself fitted with a grille badge from a more modern car, and its rear badges are fitted incorrectly as well. It's just the kind of thing that if a car has had work, people maybe aren't as careful as you and I when it comes to keeping them totally accurate. But that's not important. Susie is a Mini Mayfair, the posher of the two Minis you could buy back in '84. But following a rejig of the range in summer 1980, just before the launch of the Metro, they distilled everything down to a single 998cc version of the famous A-Series engine and left us with 3 models. The basic Mini City lacked even a passenger sun visor, never mind a passenger door mirror. But the Mini Clubman was replaced by the new Mini HL, which still wasn't flush with features, but it was relatively decadent with its plastic wheel trims, reverse lights, and instruments in front of the driver. There was also a Mini HL Estate, complete with the old Clubman front end before it too was discontinued in 1982. The following year, the Mini HL Saloon was replaced by the new Mini Mayfair, with stripes and decals to show everyone that you were posh, opting for the more expensive version of one of Britain's cheapest cars. In the Mini's 25th anniversary year, you could still buy a Mini City, now with an E at the end to symbolise its economy gearing, 2.95 to 1 to be exact, making any Mini from this era cruise at lower revs than even a 1275 equipped Metro. You can see from the difference in attitude how much more refined Austin Rover wanted the Mayfair to appear compared to the City, what with its fancy metallic paint, push-button, medium-wave, long-wave radio, and even Rochelle trim on the seats and the doors. Now, of course, this means Susie has relatively little vinyl on her interior, but Rochelle is the trim reserved on larger Austin Rover cars for the range-topping Vanden Plas. And by that, I do not limit us to an Austin Montego, but instead the full-fat 3.5-litre V8-powered Rover Vanden Plas. This little Mini has the same and genuinely very nice seat trim as a Rover SD1. She also has triplex Sundim tinted glass, pop-out rear quarter windows and fresh air vents on the dashboard. On top of the knitted fabric, her front seats recline. She has fitted cut pile carpets, twin door bins and even a handbrake grip. But it's outside where sheer self-indulgence rears its head, because atop the reversing lights, plastic wheel trims and Mayfair graphics, we have twin door mirrors, a locking fuel filler cap, and above all else, opaline green metallic. In fact, the only 2 options this car does not have ticked are an automatic gearbox, thank God, and the Exacton alloy wheels with plastic wheel arch extensions. Ooh, it's alright for some. So, why do I love Minis so much? Why is it that for 20 years, since I was a toddler, why is it that I've always wanted a Mini? Well, I think, first and foremost, in the early 2000s, Minis were still about, but they weren't everywhere anymore. They were that, little section of rareness where you'd still see, a couple a week, but they weren't absolutely everywhere. And as such an old car, they stood out to me in the early 2000s. They were incredibly cute, and there's so much material on them because it's a Mini. They're everywhere. 5.3 million of them produced, the most popular British car ever produced. So, why wouldn't I notice them as a little kid who absolutely adored cars? But what I do know is that the seed was very firmly planted by the time I was 6 years old. Because at school, we had to do a little project. Either make something or write about something that interested us, totally of our own volition. Whatever we wanted, we had to make a project about it. And I did mine on the Mini. So I did the Mini story when I was 6 years old. And so, for probably a couple of years before then, obsessed, adore Minis, they're ace. And it just so happens as well that they are brilliant little cars. Because there are so many cars that you idolise as a kid or think are brilliant or whatever. They're actually not very good. They just appeal to you for whatever reason. These are fantastic. But it means that, you know, unlike a lot of people whose dream car is something, you know, made of pure unobtainium, Minis are everywhere. And I always envisioned that at the age of 17 I would have a Mini. Now, of course, I didn't, because by 2016, the year before I turned 17, prices had really started to go up. I remember finding a Mini for about £3,000. It was this kind of era, actually. I think it was a City E, 1982. Cinnabar red. It was a lovely thing, but at £3,000, well, actually, at the age of 16, my parents were not entertaining it. And then by the age of 17, Minis were all like £8,000, and it was ridiculous. And then the pandemic came along, and prices went mad again, and horrible. But I ended up with the Metros, and, you know, I wouldn't ever sell Melvin now. I adore that little car. Metros are great, at least K-Series ones are. And, you know, they're lovely cars, and they introduced me to some of my best friends. And Twin Cam is down to the Metros and stuff. So, you know, no regrets there with buying a Metro. Love it. But, you know, I always envisioned that someday I will have a Mini. It was always the thing, and it's only now that prices have come down a little bit that I've managed to get into this one. Now, I said at the beginning that I wasn't, you know, thinking that I was going to end up in a Mini necessarily this year. I wasn't rushing for it at all, you know, but I came across this one, and yeah, here she is. Here is Susie, and I'm just, yeah, I'm beside myself. Absolutely adore it. And so, as you can probably tell already, it's a lovely little car, this. With that longer final drive ratio, with the 2.95 gearing, it's so refined, and it really doesn't, you know, show itself up in traffic. It doesn't show itself up in town. But you can sit and cruise in fourth gear at 30 miles per hour, and it's ticking over at like 1,000 RPM. It's very, very long gearing, but that means that it's relatively refined. Now, Minis are not refined body shells. When they rejigged the Mini range in 1980, they introduced what were known as the quiet Minis. That is, they put some more sound deadening in, changed a couple of bits around, and made Minis a lot quieter. But in 1982, when they put the economy gearing in, that made them, you know, a shed load more refined again. Because it means that at 70 miles per hour, you know, one of these is like 3,000 RPM max. I can't remember the exact figures off the top of my head, but it's not revving its nuts off. And it's revving a lot less than even a 1275 Metro would. So like Melody on a motorway, who was absolutely fine, absolutely competent, this car revs lower. And the reason they could get away with doing that on the 998 Minis, of course there are only 998 Minis in the mid-80s, the reason they could get away with doing that is because the Minis are that much lighter than a Metro. You know, a Metro is 800, well, I think, you know, Melody being a 5-door Metro 1.3L was 830 kilograms maybe, something like that. This is maximum 670 kilos, so it's significantly lighter. So you tune, you know, if you're modifying a Mini, you modify it for top end, for peak performance, peak power. Whereas if you're modifying a Metro, you modify it for torque, because you really need that in the car that weighs that much more. So that's why Austin Rover could get away with putting this longer differential ratio, taller differential ratio in these cars. Now, in 1980, for the 85 model year, so only a month after Susie, they got rid of that because they went to the 12-inch wheels, which geared it up. So they put it back to the old final drive ratio, which, you know, overall brought it back down to a similar level. But I still think, happy to be corrected, because I think I probably am wrong with this, but I think that these are the tallest geared Minis that you can get. And, you know, we're pulling up this hill now, we're doing 42 miles per hour. And, yeah, I'm not at full throttle, and it's a really steep hill, and we're just pulling up it because, you know, an A-series engine has loads of torque. We had to slow down for cyclists, but, yeah, I'm very, very happy with the way this car is geared. I certainly wouldn't choose the lower gearing, you know, in a car that, like this, I want to be able to take to car shows and to take all across the country and to have fun in. I think it'll become in great use having that taller fourth gear. Or that taller all the gears, should I say. Now, I think I've already mentioned it, but I can't quite remember. The gear change is sublime. If we keep on the gearing for a bit, this is the best gear change I've ever experienced in an A-Series car. And while second gear synchromesh isn't always at your beckoning call, that's a standard Mini thing, it's competent nonetheless. It's fine. It doesn't need a rebuild at this point. It's absolutely acceptable. But yeah, it's just so accurate and it's so snappy, the gear changes, that you can feel that it's a low mileage car. And so I'm very, very pleased with that. And the trim in here is all in lovely condition. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's nice. And I'm so, so happy with that. It's just lovely. I'm so, so pleased with it. The driving position is still uncomfortable because it's a Mini. The driver's seat is all the way back, and I need to get some extended seat brackets for it because this is still uncomfortable on a long drive. And I might get a drop bracket for the steering column as well, just so I can sit a little bit more reclined. But yeah, we're bobbing along now at over 60 miles per hour. And yeah, it tracks beautifully. It bobs along really nicely. You can feel it's not revving that much. The engine is not that pronounced in spite of, well, you know, it's a Mini, so it's always relatively pronounced, but yeah, I'm so happy. And the suspension, it's a bit worn. We'll get to that in the next video because I'm going to talk about the problems this car has. But yeah, it feels like a Mini, which means that the handling and the platform and the stability and the confidence it gives you in the turning is all just sublime. Little rev match down to third. Yeah, it's really, really lovely. The brakes need a bit of a service. They're drums all round. They work absolutely fine. They are competent, but there's a little bit more pedal travel than you might expect. So they just need adjusting, really. They just need adjusting. Whole car needs a service. Look, we're doing speeds now. And yeah, it's just so nice, and it still tracks perfectly well. I'm so, so pleased. And the seats with this lovely Van den Plas Rochelle trim, which I'm so proud of, is nice and comfortable. Yeah, it's all just nice. The headline is in lovely condition. Sun visors are nice. The steering wheel is immaculately clean. Even with 33,000 miles, you wouldn't expect the texture to be so pronounced on the steering wheel. Yeah, it's all just lovely. It's all just nice. And the body shell, I must say, actually, this is the thing that I'm most pleased with the entire car, is that the body shell feels rigid. Now, it's a Mini. You know, they were produced to the lowest possible quality that British Leyland or Austin Rover by this point, the lowest possible quality that they thought they could get away with. As every small car is. If that's news to you, then yeah, that shouldn't be news to you. Every car is produced to the minimum possible quality that its manufacturer thinks they can get away with. But it's funny. So below the windscreen of a Mini, there are two welds, there's one in each corner, and they're both not great. This one, however, is slightly cracked. So below the windscreen, there is a slightly cracked weld. And in spite of stuff like that, in spite of the fact that it's 40 years of age, it's had a bit of welding in its life, this body shell feels in better condition. It feels more rigid than Melody's body shell. Now, I think in the introduction to Melody video, I think I mentioned that it's just, there's wind noise and there's roll going on, there's the body shell is moving about. And I put that down to it being a 5-door Metro, because 3-door Metros are certainly not like that. And it may well be like that. Closed road where I wanted to go. But the first thing my dad said, so my dad's insured to drive this car, and so he's taken it out for a drive, but the first time he got in it was the day after I got it. And he sat in the passenger seat, he went out for a drive with me, and he said, this feels in better condition than Melody. And it is, it absolutely is. In fact, I'll go left here. And sure, the suspension is more worn than Melody's suspension ended up being. There is more wear in everything because, you know, Melody had a lot of work. And so I made her, suspension-wise, a lot better, but the body shell of this car just feels better than the Metros. Not as good as Melvin's, but it feels better than Melody's. And so that is something that I'm really, really pleased with this thing. You know, having collected it in the manner I did, knowing that this was the car for me, opaline green, lovely trim, low owner, low miles, lots of history, etc. I knew I was getting it, so I just drove it away. I didn't go out for a test drive in it, nothing like that. I paid the deposit, went there, had a chat, collected all the history, and then just left in the car. Went around the corner, filled up with fuel, and then jumped on the motorway. And I was very, very pleased that it feels like it does. But at the end of the day, although it does need work, although it is worn in places, you can tell that this was just somebody's car. And so in spite of any wear it might have, it still just ticks over very nicely. And sure, it didn't like suddenly doing a lot of work. I don't like doing a lot of work, so I have full sympathy with Susie in that regard. I'm lazy as well. But being shoved on a motorway and suddenly getting warm, being turned off and turned back on and expected to do it, she didn't like that. But I have no problems with it whatsoever. But you can tell that this car was just used up until only a few months ago. But, in spite of that, I've actually used this car more than the previous owner did across a number of years. But, she just poopled about the shops in it, and so it wasn't off the road or anything. It was just very gently being used in a way these cars were kind of meant to be back in the day. They only have 5-digit odometers because the manufacturer never really envisioned them doing 100,000 miles. That was kind of outside of the service life. It's generally considered that 100,000 miles is time for an engine rebuild. That's just how motoring was back in the day. Everyone always says, oh, they don't build them like they used to. God, if they did, everyone would really complain. Cars used to be rubbish. And this is coming from someone who loves classic cars, but I get to live with them all the time. I get to drive them all the time. And classic cars, they are not quality products like modern cars are. There are exceptions, of course, that prove that rule. But, even Fords in the 2000s, certainly in the late 90s, Fords only had 5-digit odometers. Metros had 6-digit odometers, which says a lot about what Ford expected of their cars compared to, Austin Rover later on. But, Minis only have 5-digit odometers, and that says everything you need to know about them. But, yes, that means that only doing a couple of 100 miles a year was no surprise or shock to this car's system. That's just what it was expected to do. But yeah, it drives really nicely. It thumps about a bit, and it's a little bit noisy. But now the bounciness, that's something a Mini should absolutely do. But yeah, it's lovely. I'm just so pleased with it. And it's everything that I hoped it would be. And it can be better, and it will be better with some new tyres, with some new suspension components, with a good service and a tune on the engine. It will be absolutely golden. But yeah, I'm just so very, very pleased at this moment with it. And that's why I'm going out to drive it at 6 o'clock in the morning, because I love it. You probably heard then the second gear synchro mesh did click a little bit as we went down the box, but yeah, I'm not fussed. Have some headlamps on first, we go through the forest. And the Mini really fits into my philosophy of classic cars, of vehicles in general, in that if you can, drive the smallest car you can get away with. Now I have Clarence, my big BMW 3 Series, named after the big man himself, if you are familiar with Bruce Springsteen and his E Street Band. So Clarence is my big car, does all the motorway stuff, and he's very refined at that. Now, I would have an E39 5 Series instead of the E46 3 Series, because they're a little bit more refined, they have better suspension control, etc. A little bit more load space as well for tip runs. But, for bobbing about town and for going out for a drive and enjoying yourself on Britain's tiny, narrow country lanes, like this one we're on now, enough space for two cars, but if two Range Rovers came alongside each other here, they'd be knackered. But in a Mini, we're absolutely golden. You can just sneak through spots in a Mini. Driving small cars makes you cheeky on the roads. And driving a cute car, you can get away with it. And that's a manner of driving that I just don't do with my 3 Series. In my BMW, I sit back, I relax, and I just drive. You know, I have no pretension about it. I will sit relaxed, refined, 6-cylinder refinement and comfort and smoothness, and just drive. But in the Mini, it's all this. That's how I drive the Mini versus how I drive other cars. And so it's so much more rewarding. I don't understand all these people who go out and buy something saying, yeah, I want something that I really enjoy driving, that I can go out, you know, on days like this and just experience and enjoy and thrash about the country lanes. And then they go and buy something too big. They go and buy a family saloon. I'm like, what? What on earth are you doing? There's a reason little British sports cars were little. And it's because Britain is built for little cars. Now, there aren't enough of them anymore. And I understand why that is. Legislative reasons, cost reasons, safety reasons, aesthetic reasons. But, you know, the Mini is from an era where, sure, your knees are crumple zones. Great, I know. But it means that this car is just so honed. It is just so brilliantly compact and brilliantly packaged and so well designed. Yeah, I love it. It's absolutely everything I wanted it to be. It puts a massive smile on my face. And I cannot wait to start fixing it up, getting it perfect, or at least as perfect as I can. And then going out for drives and going to car shows and going meeting friends and, you know, hooning about the place. In fact, I've got another story to tell actually, because a couple of weeks ago I went out to the pub with a couple of friends who I've not seen for a while. And I went out to the pub with them because one of my old friends is moving to Canada. So I invited a few of his old schoolmates out to go to the pub, to say goodbye, which is lovely. And so we went out the pub, and I was due to be picking up one of my friends. And so I thought, I'll take the Mini, because, you know, brilliant. A few of us are car enthusiasts. The friend I was picking up isn't a car enthusiast, but, you know, I thought, let's go out in the Mini, then I can show off my cool car to everyone. The first thing he said as he walked up to it, I've not seen this guy in about 2 years. We're mates, but, you know, we're not seeing each other. And the first thing he said, before even hello, was he got in the car and said, this is really nice. And he's not a car enthusiast, but he gets it. And it's lovely. It is really, really nice. Imperfect, but 41 years old. What do you expect? But the hilarious thing is that when we were driving down the road, my friend sat next to me got a call from another friend, and then got another call from another friend. Yeah, you see the problem. And so I ended up with, I'm only 5'9", I'm not particularly tall, but my 3 friends that I ended up having in the car are all over 6 foot. And so we ended up with 3 6-footers and me 5'9" driving in this little Mini, and it's 10 feet and a quarter of an inch long. This car gets lost in supermarket car parks. You park it next to a 20-year-old Corsa, which I look at and think is a small car. It's one of the last truly small super Minis before they started to get quite tall and become very inefficient. But I would remark the Corsa C to be a small car. And I parked the Mini up in Tesco, and then I came out of Tesco, and the Mini only extends to like halfway down the Corsa's rear end. It's silly how small these cars are, but then you can fit 4 adults in one pretty comfortably as well. It's an absolute work of genius. I love it. It's my favourite car of all time. It's my dream car. I'm so lucky that my dream car is not something super expensive, that I could just get one. But it's taken me enough years to finally get one, and so I'm just over the moon. I adore it. I think it's fantastic. And, you know, the long-term plan with this car is I don't want to sell it. It's such a nice thing, and there's so much to be done with it as well, that there's endless scope for improvement. It has that great history file. It just has everything that I wanted of it. It's a great colour, it's a great trim. I know it won't be to everyone's liking, but I adore the interior trim. The colour is my favourite Austin Rover colour. It's so old lady spec, and I love that. I think it's the cutest thing in the world. I just adore it. So I want to keep it, I want to improve it, and I want to take it on adventures. I want to go to Europe in this thing. I want to put a roof tent on it. I want to load it up with stuff. And I want to go on mad 1,000-mile adventures in this car. Because why wouldn't you? That's what cars are about. Cars are not about just sitting and looking at them as very cumbersome and difficult to use ornaments. Cars are there to be driven. And while I wouldn't, put this through a British winter and all the salt, and on that note, actually, I need to find storage for Melvin's body shell desperately. So anyone in West Lancashire has cheap storage just for a Metro body shell, let me know, because I could do with getting this indoors, and it will be indoors by the winter, no doubt about it. But in the summer like this, pottering about the place, why on earth wouldn't you? Why on earth wouldn't you? I'm so pleased with it. It's glorious. I couldn't have asked for better. Join me for this silly video series I'm about to do. So in the next video, we will be a little bit less gushing, and we will talk about what's wrong with this car. We'll go over all its problems, everything that needs to be fixed, and then in the next however many videos after that, we will then fix everything, or fix as much as I can anyway, as it sits here and now. So yeah, very pleased, and thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please do click like and subscribe to Twin Cam as well. Really does mean a lot, and I'm forever indebted to my long-suffering Patreon supporters. So if you'd like to support me that way, then please do follow the link in the description, and I will have more videos coming along soon.